This is the Marvel Masterworks vidcast, True Believers, where we cover all of the adventures in the Marvel Universe. From the wanderings of the Green Goliath, to the chaotic offices of the Daily Bugle, to the grim alleyways of Hell's Kitchen, and to the top of Avengers Tower. With your hosts, Adam and Chris.
Welcome to another episode of the Marvel Masterworks vidcast and podcast. As always, I'm your host, Adam. And I think for the first time on a Marvel episode, joining me is Chris. Chris, how's it going?
Doing great, Adam. I guess, this is my first time probably on a Marvel cast. So thanks for having me along. I'm excited to be here. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. And it's always nice when I can talk about my favorite Marvel character. Which is what we're going to do tonight, and that individual is Daredevil. The reason we're talking about Daredevil, you don't have to twist my arm to talk about Daredevil. That's the first thing. But the second reason is I always wanted to do shows focused on Daredevil. I just wanted to find the right sort of jumping in point and purpose or a piece of information or a comic or something to kind of attach the episode to, and a lot of that information came back during San Diego Comic-Con, which Donnie and I discussed on a previous episode, but we'll delve into it a little bit more here, at least the points that are important to Daredevil. But before we get into all that and our main focus of the show, which will be going back and reviewing each individual episode of the formerly Netflix but now Disney Plus Daredevil series, going episode by episode for all three seasons. We're going to start with episode 1. Obviously, it wouldn't make sense to start with the last episode of season 3 and work backwards. So we're going to start with episode 1. But before that, let's what I like to do whenever we start a new or when we focus on a particular character, as I should say, that we haven't really keyed in on before, is I like to talk about how we got into that character and what drew us to that character. So, Chris, what is your relationship in terms of with the character of Daredevil? How did you get into the character?
So I discovered Daredevil, I guess, in the early 90s, probably like 91. I used to spend a lot of time at my grandfather's house during like summers and stuff like that. And there was a major like bulk retail store called Sam's Club.
We used to have it.
So I would go shopping there with him, and they would sell these bulk stacks of like miscellaneous Marvel comics, and you would get like 20 or 25 random comics in a stack. So it would be Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, Thor, Incredible Hulk, Wolverine, X-Men. But I remember Daredevil was thrown in there one time, and I read the issue. I don't remember exactly what issue it was. It was so long ago. But that was my first time being aware of the character. And then shortly after that, I started going to comic book stores and comic book shows. They had a comic book show every month, 1 week in a month in my town, and that's when I would start buying individual Daredevil issues and reading them. So 91, I guess, was around when I discovered him, and then I started reading him probably in like 92.
Okay, all right, cool. Funny enough, the comics weren't the first avenue of discovery for Daredevil with me. For me, it was the 2003 movie starring Ben Affleck. I and Jennifer Garner, where's the pen? Hold on, I got to do it. It's on every show if I can find the pen. All right, here it is. And if anybody didn't know, hasn't listened to the show before, Jennifer Garner is on the list, ladies and gentlemen. So I remember watching that show or hearing about that movie and seeing the trailers, not knowing anything about the character, and thinking, because I remember the early trailers had, from the um, from the how did it go? Something about from the producers of Spider-Man, because I guess some of the producers were the same. Probably Feige at the time in his associate, role or whatever he had at the time, or and then it said from the studio that brought you. Yeah, I think it was more to do with something. They tied it into Spider-Man somehow. I don't know how they did it, or the next Marvel hero from the studio that brought you Spider-Man, something along those lines. That was in the trailer, and then I just remember seeing the trailer, and I was intrigued by it. I'm like, I have no idea what this character is about. And back then, they had at the end of the trailer, it said visit, and they had the movie website. So I went on and I was reading the bios, and I'm like, it's kind of cool. I liked it that he had a disability, physical disability, much like I do. So that was the kind of commonality there. That I thought, oh, that's cool. I never saw a character with a disability before. And back then, I was just coming around. By the way, this is 2003, so I was just coming around back into reading comics. So it's not like I had any knowledge of, hey, Barbara Gordon's been shot by the Joker and now she's in a wheelchair. So for all intents and purposes, Daredevil is the first disabled superhero that I saw. And then it's funny because he was wearing red. And I'm like, oh, I mean, imagine if they made just because he was wearing red. But like, it'd be cool if they made a Flash movie one day, and that was the end of it. And so one is supposedly going to come out, provided the star behaves himself, or themselves.
We'll see.
But it's supposed to come out. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Then I started talking to a friend of mine about it, about the movie, and I convinced him, I showed him the trailer. He said, yeah, it looks cool. We'll go see it. And we went, and I ended up loving the movie. And again, this was the theatrical cut, and then I loved the director's cut afterwards, even more. But what is it about side note, what is it about Ben Affleck in every superhero movie that he's in has to have an extended cut or director's cut, or is that part of his contract? I don't know. But so
you're right. We got BVS Ultimate Edition. We got a 4-hour-long Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Yeah, which are the better versions of both of those movies.
And the director's cut of this Daredevil movie that you're talking about is definitely better than the theatrical.
Yeah, even though I like the theatrical, I love the director's cut even more. But it was funny, immediately after that movie, when I got home, because I had started going to my comic shop and getting the DC stuff. But when I got home, I called my comic book guy, and I said, "You got any Daredevil stuff? Because I just saw the movie and I loved it, and I want to read about the character." He's like, "Yeah, I got some graphic novels I can hook you up with." And then I went, and he gave me The Man Without Fear by Frank Miller.
Frank Miller, yep.
Yeah. And he also gave me Daredevil Yellow by Loeb and Sale. And I was hooked. And for those wondering, to this day, the only physical Marvel book that is on my pull list is Daredevil. So sometimes the movies can draw somebody in to the comics. And in this case, it worked for me. And I've been reading Daredevil pretty much ever since 2003. And so, yeah, he's my favorite Marvel character for sure. And then we're going to discover this as we talk, but I love the Netflix series when it was at Netflix. And I was quite upset when, or not, I mean, I didn't start yelling at, cancel my Netflix subscription. I didn't partake in any hashtag stuff, but, I was bummed that it was canceled because of the transfer of of power to Disney, getting the rights to all the Marvel characters. So I was bummed, and I'm like, well, there goes that. Who knows if they're going to do a movie? I can't imagine. At that time, I'm like, Disney's not going to, go the Daredevil route. They're going to stick with the Iron Mans and the Avengers, and they're not going to tread into potentially darker territory. Not that when I say that, not to say that Daredevil is inherently, grimdark. There are runs of the character that are slightly lighter. I mean, not Fantastic Four light and jovial, but you know what I mean. There's a middle ground there that I think we'll see in live action a little bit going forward, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So I was bummed when the show got canceled. But what was your take on just overall on the show when you were watching it? Just an overall opinion of it.
Oh, I loved it from the moment that it started. So for me, it was one of the first Netflix series that was in a Netflix original series that I straight up binge watched like as soon as it dropped. For Netflix, I had mostly used it to watch older shows like How I Met Your Mother or Breaking Bad, The Walking Dead, stuff like that. But when Daredevil dropped, it was the first actual Netflix series that I had been anticipating, and I blew through it immediately. I loved it so much. I loved the first season. I loved the second season. The third season does some really interesting things, and of course, we're going to get to all of that here throughout the course of this podcast. But from the beginning all the way through, I really liked what they did with the series, and can't wait to talk about it.
You know what's funny that you mentioned the third season, and I'll admit this on the show, and I'm going to get to it eventually, but because when I was about to watch the third season, the news got out that it was done because of I was so pissed off that I'm like, why am I going to get invested into this season? And then it's probably going to end on some sort of borderline cliffhanger. And I'm going to end up being pissed off after I watch it. So I'm not going to watch it. I'm like, screw it. I've been burned too many times by show. I get into a show and then it gets canceled. Sarah Connor Chronicles, I'm still looking at you. Fox, thanks a lot for nothing. Firefly's another one. So I decided, screw it, I'm not going to watch it. So I'll be watching season 3 for the first time when we discuss it. But so before we get into the news or to the show, as I discussed way back when not way back when, a couple of weeks ago, when Donnie and I did a comic book Comic-Con wrap-up, rather I should say. We discussed Marvel's, presentation at San Diego Comic-Con. And, I mean, they threw out a lot of amazing announcements. 2 Avengers movies, Fantastic Four.
Fantastic Four, yep.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, this is great. Blade has now had a date, which is another one of my Marvel guys. Yeah, right. And so I'm like, all right, cool. Honestly, the most exciting, just think about this. They announced 2 back-to-back Avengers movies. You'd think that would be the most exciting announcement for me, right? Because it's Avengers. Nah, that was nice, but the big, the one that had me smiling from ear to ear for a day was the fact that they announced a 18 episode, and this is very important. 18 episode, this is right out of Kevin Feige's mouth. First season, so implying that it's not just a one and done 18 and that's it. An 18 episode first season of a Daredevil series, bringing back Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio, called Daredevil Born Again.
Pretty big news.
Like I said, that was the news of Comic-Con.
Well, we were waiting for something, right? Because ever since Matt Murdock appeared in Spider-Man No Way Home,
right,
you knew that there was no reason that they were going to reintroduce him into that universe if they didn't have future plans for him.
Right.
So at Comic-Con, those plans got made a little bit clearer to us. And you're right, it was a shock. It was a big announcement, and it definitely was one of the most surprising and exciting announcements, I think.
Yeah, and do you think, now here's a question. I don't think that just because it's titled Born Again, that means we're going to get a blow-by-blow adaptation of the Daredevil Born Again comic.
No.
I think it's a play on words, Born Again, because the series is being brought back.
Right, kind of like they did with Spider-Man Homecoming. That was Spider-Man coming back to the Marvel Universe.
Right.
So you're right. I think the name probably has that double meaning to it.
Because apparently, and again, I don't know because I haven't watched it yet, but apparently season 3 of the Netflix Daredevil did some Born Again type stuff. They dealt with some Born Again type content.
I don't really remember because I don't recall that storyline. I don't think I read that one in the comics.
Well, we'll be doing some comic reading on this Daredevil show as well.
Sweet.
So you'll get to read that at some point. But again, even if the show did touch on it, I mean, how many Batman movies borrowed from Dark Knight Returns? So just because they've taken elements doesn't mean they can't mine them in a reworked way. So, but we'll see. But I think it's a play on words more so than we're doing a straight up, Born Again adaptation. The other interesting thing is that
18 episodes, man. That's like a third of the year.
Network show, yeah.
That's 4 straight months that we're going to be getting a Daredevil episode every week. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's perfect for me.
Yeah, I'll take it.
I mean, look, there's one reason. Okay, there's 2 reasons that I got Disney Plus in the first place: the Marvel stuff and the Star Wars stuff.
Yeah,
like God bless Disney and all that jazz, but I could care less about Little Mermaid,
Toy Story. That's not why I got it.
Well, Toy Story, I kind of dig it. I dig Toy Story. So Toy Story and Hercules are probably, like, if we're talking like typical Disney, that's those 2. I'll allow it. Those 2 are cool. But I'm not there for the princesses. Peter Pan, yeah, sure, he's all right. Hook is the best version of Peter Pan. I'm just gonna put that out there. With Robin Williams, that's the best version of Peter Pan. Take it or leave it.
That's my favorite.
Right? Yeah. So like all the traditional, it's not for me. So the only reason I have Disney Plus is for the Marvel stuff and for the Star Wars stuff. I'm not going to be honest. And now they're doing Zorro, which Zorro is a favorite of mine. They're doing a Zorro live action show. So that's reason number 3. But yeah. So this is basically, they said we're going to they weren't going to abolish. They weren't going to take the Marvel and Star Wars stuff off their service. But if they wanted to ensure my monthly subscription continuing, put a Daredevil show on and you got me. So so there it is. But yeah, 18 episodes, that's amazing. And it certainly bucks the trend of 6 to 9 that we've become accustomed to with the MCU and Star Wars shows. But I think that the premiere date is fall 2024.
Oh, really?
So it's a while still, but it's not like the MCU is going to be devoid of content between now and then that I'm going to be, twiddling my thumbs until then, so.
Well, and it's not going to be devoid of Daredevil content either because he's going to be popping up in She-Hulk and Echo.
Great segue, yeah. And Echo made a lot of sense because that character came from the Daredevil comics. It was born out of the Daredevil comics. I wasn't expecting the She-Hulk appearance. And then when that was revealed, I was like, cool. And, that was revealed in print first, and then
in the trailer.
We saw him in the trailer. And Chris, I gotta tell you, you have no idea how quickly and excitedly I lost my shit over the fact that he's wearing the yellow and red costume.
Pretty awesome.
Like the Daredevil yellow, Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale. And it works. It absolutely works. I'm amazed that, like, Marvel, the MCU is like, we embrace the comics. We don't care if at first glance you people think it's silly. We're going to make it so that by the end of it, you don't think it's silly, which is what they've done 9 times out of 10. I mean, look at Guardians of the Galaxy. They made me enjoy and get emotional over a talking tree and a talking raccoon. If you would have told me that a decade ago, I would have laughed in your face and said, get the hell out of here.
And as we will see going through the Netflix series, the Netflix series took a much darker tone, and I don't mean darker just in the sense of like the storyline. I mean like literally, physically, the writing, the clothing. It's darker. So we'll see we'll see that he begins in the all black, homemade Daredevil costume that he's put together. He'll progress. He'll progress to the darker red suit that he gets made for him. But the MCU has established a universe in which what was once thought to be an outlandish superhero costume can exist and can work. So now that we're bringing Daredevil and that character into a show like She-Hulk that is not dark, decidedly, it's very bright, very colorful. You're going to see the characters in this show reflect that tone as well.
Right. It's going to be a lighter take on Daredevil. And again, that doesn't mean that he's going to pull out a Daredevil credit card and there's no nipples on at least I don't think there are nipples on the Daredevil suit. But the way I perceive the phrase lighter is that he's going to be more of a swashbuckling type of character as opposed to the bone breaking vigilante type thing, which is apropos if you and this is probably new to you, which you'll discover eventually, but the Mark Waid run on Daredevil was very much that, where he was more of a swashbuckling adventurer, more so than I'm gonna break your elbows and make you talk kind of deal. And that's fine. I'm down for that because Mark Waid is a genius, and his run was pretty cool. So if that's the kind of tone they're going for, then I'll be cool with it. But I'm getting more Daredevil. So at the end of the day, until they give me something that I feel disrespects the character or does a disservice, then I'll complain. But until then, I'm going to be excited and happy that I'm getting more Daredevil.
Yep.
So, but that's the latest information we have. So we're going to see Charlie Cox in She-Hulk, and then Echo before he appears in his own series again. So we'll look forward to those, and we'll definitely discuss them when they happen. But right now we're going to take a quick break, and then on the other side of the break, we'll come back and talk about Season 1, Episode 1 of Daredevil. So stay tuned.
I'm your host, Adam.
And I'm the Emerald Enthusiast.
And for all your multiverse viewing and listening needs, check out our shows.
That includes Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Ghostbusters, Masters of the Universe, the Marvel Universe, and the DC Comics Universe, including the Emerald Echo podcast.
All right here on YouTube and Podbean. From the first podcast and vidcast to the last.
And we're back. As always, as promised, we're going to delve right into Season 1, Episode 1 of Daredevil. That was formerly on Netflix, but can now be found and enjoyed on Disney+. This show starred Charlie Cox, as Matt Murdock in Daredevil. It starred Karen Page. No, Karen Page. That's the character. What's her name?
Deborah Ann
Wool as Karen Page.
Yep.
And
Eldon Henson as Foggy Nelson.
Indeed, and of course, Vincent D'Onofrio as Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin. So
That's my favorite. Always been my favorite Daredevil opponent. So
he's the quintessential. Yeah, he's the quintessential villain. Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
So Chris, give us a bit of a synopsis of episode 1, and let's go through it.
Okay, this episode is basically an origin story for Matt Murdock about how, as a child, he loses his eyesight in a terrible accident, but the accident also enhances his other senses, which later in life allow him to take on criminals as the vigilante Daredevil, which he hasn't even got his name this early in the show. But so we're shown his backstory as a child and a little bit of his upbringing with his dad through flashbacks in the episode. But it's also an origin story for Nelson and Murdock, attorneys at law. So Foggy Nelson is Matt Murdock's best friend / business partner. And this episode shows us the formation of their business together. We actually see them picking out their very first office and interviewing and securing their very first client, who you mentioned earlier as Karen Page in the cast list. So in this first episode, they swoop in to help Karen, who has been accused of murder in a crime that she contends she did not commit. Through various maneuverings, they are able to, before the end of the episode, get her out of jail, and she kind of goes to work for them at the end of the episode as their very first employee of Nelson and Murdock, attorney at law. Right. We also get some background on the shady element of the story. So we have some of the criminal element rearing their head in the show, and it's all entangled with Karen and her company that she works, and a conspiracy involving large amounts of cash from that company being transferred in and out through their slush fund, which is like a pension fund. And that's kind of the overall view of this whole first episode.
Yeah, very well put there, Chris. So what I liked about it, you said it was an origin, but it didn't go blow by blow, let's take you step by step. He's a kid, he has the accident, his father boxes, we see some boxing matches, his father gets killed, da-da-da-da-da-da. It didn't go through linear step by step. It starts with, like, the accident's already happened. We're post-accident. Right. He's on the ground. His father comes to him and, he's blinded and whatever. Then fade to back in black, and it cuts to him as an adult in a confessional, asking for forgiveness for what he's about to do.
Yep. And right after that confessional, we see what he's about to do. He breaks up a human trafficking ring, and that's why he says he was at the confessional. He says he's not here for penance. He's here to ask forgiveness for what he's about to do. So this is early on. I think that we're supposed to understand in his career as a crime fighter. Right.
But it's also cool because it checks the basics of Daredevil. Like you've got that. It tells you, shows you bits of, look, he was blinded by this accident. It gives you enough of what you need to know for that portion, at least for the time being. Then it shows him in the confessional, which I think is important because the Daredevil character has always been, religion has always been a theme. Like his Catholicism is a big thing for the character, which again is something that in the comic book superhero genre, they kind of keep away from religion. Like they don't really, it's not really a plot point or a character beat anywhere else but pretty much Daredevil, right?
You don't really see Peter Parker dealing with
Jewish,
you don't see Peter Parker dealing with religious situations. You don't see that ever really being an issue with, like, say, the Fantastic Four or Wolverine. But with Daredevil, and we'll see throughout the series, a lot of that owing to his upbringing, especially through, I think, the foster care system once his father was no longer around. So we'll see that becomes a very important aspect of his life.
Yeah. So I like the way they gave you that, or snippets of that right away. But they also got to the point. Like, they showed us, Daredevil basically kicking butt right off the bat. And, you spoke about it earlier, about, the tone and the darkness. And that, not just the themes, but also, like, the lighting and the cinematography. And that works so well to set the tone here of the show and for this particular incarnation of the character. I thought it was pitch perfect in terms of that aspect. Like, it drops you right into that world, and it's like you're reading the issues of The Man Without Fear. Like, those are right out of that action sequence is seemingly right out of the graphic novel, from what I remember when I read it. Certainly the outfit is, and yeah, like, that first fight was pretty brutal. Like, they don't pull the punches, pun intended, kind of thing, So it's
sure, he's a brawler. He's gonna snap some bones.
Yeah.
And he's not out there to put on an acrobatic display. He's accomplishing a goal. And he's out there to exact some vengeance on the bad guys of the night.
And what I like about it too is it's so funny now that knowing that he's in the MCU and watching this, and so now I know it's going to be a little different. Like, things are going to be, certain parts are going to carry over, others aren't. But just to think about, okay, if you watch it with the perspective of, okay, it's MCU now, right? This is so different than anything we've seen in 26 movies.
And it was even at the time that it came out, and I think that plays a little bit into, in this first episode, of course, they want to tie it in to the larger MCU, so they mention like the attack on New York, but it's mentioned in passing, and then after they move past that, it's talking about Hell's Kitchen rebuilding.
Yeah.
But
what they call it, the event? Is that what Avengers 1 was called?
I think so.
In this show, it was the event.
But the darkness and tone creates like you said, it's a big shift from what we've come to expect from the MCU, especially from, like you mentioned, movies like Guardians of the Galaxy. They're so bright and colorful, and you get something like this, and so much of it takes place in the shadows.
Yeah. I mean, the closest thing, and it's not even that close, that I can compare it to MCU-wise in terms of tone, is probably Winter Soldier, the episode, the movie, the Captain America Winter Soldier. That's the closest, that you'll see in the MCU to this.
Yeah.
I would think. So yeah, that first fight was brutal in the best possible way. And then
he takes down 4 guys.
In
that fight, single-handedly.
And you kind of get there are instances where you get a sense of the enhanced hearing, but it's not really like they don't. Like, they zoom in on his, like, when they're trying to get across to the point that he's hearing what people are saying from far away. They zoom in on his ear, but there's no effect that kind of shows, oh, look, it's enhanced. Which, I get the point of it. Like, they're trying to keep it grounded as much as they can, but you still get the idea that, okay, he's got enhanced hearing.
Well, we really get 2 good displays of that later in the episode when he is using his enhanced hearing to check to check Karen's heartbeat to see if it speeds up while she's talking, because if it does, that indicates that she's lying. So I really liked the way that they employed it both of those times in this episode. It was to great effect, I thought. And we learned the first time that he uses it that she's telling the truth, that she didn't kill the guy that she was found that was found dead in her apartment. But then later in the episode, when Matt asks her, "Why are these people trying to kill you?" and he asks if she still has the pension file from Union Allied, and she says no, we can hear her heartbeat speed up, and we know that she's lying to him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was really good. Really well done. Way to show that ability. And the other thing I like too is throughout these particular moments of the episode, it really highlights his prowess and his dedication to being a lawyer. You know, which is just as important in the comics as his Catholicism. And, you know, the Ben Affleck movie had that, the lawyer stuff as well, but it was much more prevalent in the director's cut than it was the theatrical. But here, already in the first episode, we're getting a good chunk of, I mean, it's not the whole episode, but there's a nice chunk of time spent to Matt Murdock, the lawyer.
Sure.
Here. So again, what I noticed about this first episode is they had a great balance of, you know, he's a religious dude, he's a lawyer, and he's also a kick-ass vigilante. Like, there was a nice balance of all three in this first episode, which I really liked. What did you think of his banter back and forth throughout the episode with Foggy?
I really like the two actors working off of each other. I think they play really well together. They, even in instances where they don't agree, like you can see as soon as Karen says she doesn't have any money, Foggy's ready to like take off. He's like, "Well, thanks for meeting with us," and then Matt's like, "No, let's hear her out." But you get the sense that they're both trying to do what's right, even though they might have different methods of it. But I think the interplay between the two of them, it was really good.
Yeah, and even when they're talking about, like, when he's like, you know, Foggy's like, every time there's a girl or a woman and she's in distress, you roll me into helping her out, and then you end up hooking up with her, or something of that nature. Their interplay in the first season, and this is a good thing. I'm not going to do this every time we talk, but it was on par with what we saw in the movie, because I thought the movie did that very well with Affleck and Jon Favreau.
Jon Favreau, yeah. So Favreau was a great Foggy.
Oh, it really was. And side note, it was kind of. I smirked when I saw Foggy as Happy sitting at a breakfast table with Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock, because it was kind of like a multiverse reunion of a Foggy with a Daredevil. It was kind of.
That is pretty cool. I never thought about that.
Kind of fun. So that was cool. I appreciated that. But yeah, so their banter and interplay is really good, and it's very much reminiscent of what you'll see in the comics as well.
Well, they're not just, you get the sense that they're not just business partners, but they're best friends too, Yeah,
you definitely get that sense. I really liked there was a scene when, after they confer with Karen, and he's like, she can stay with me because she's, or actually they conferred with her when they took her case, the big bad behind the scenes, which we know to be Wilson Fisk, even though he's never seen, he's only heard. He tries to have her killed in the cell. She escapes that, and then Matt says she can come stay with me for the night to keep her safe until we find a better solution, right? And then so when he takes her back to his place, they have this great conversation where it's like she is asking questions of him because he's blind, that when you see him do the stuff that he just, the way he functions in a courtroom or in an interrogation room and just moving around his office, it would leave you asking questions, because when you could imagine in the real world, if you tell me somebody has a disability like myself or is blind, like in the case of Daredevil, you wouldn't expect them to be able to move around so fluidly and well, as Matt Murdock can. A lot of people, for example, when I tell them that I'm a 4th-degree black belt, they're kind of like they kind of stop and they're like, how do you do it with the cane and this and that. So you get those questions of how do you do this, how do you do that, and Karen was doing that same kind of questioning to him, and I thought it was a very realistic kind of like scenario. Whereas if she's put in that situation with because again, you see him move around his apartment and he's like it's as if he wasn't blind in a way, the way he moves around his apartment, right?
Yeah, he navigates his space very well.
So those kind of questions that she's asking are I think it's a very realistic scenario, and I like the way they did that. And he knew they were coming because he's probably spent his whole life answering these types of questions. So I like the way that was played off. And the cool thing about that was his apartment set, when in the nighttime scenes, like the lighting, you could see the red coming in, which is symbolic of the, and the way it like sort of the light shone off his head, like it gave the impression of red hair, even though he doesn't have red hair, but in the comics he does. So it kind of were like nods to that in their own way. Yeah, I like that.
I liked that he said he got a killer deal on the apartment because they put up a giant billboard screen outside of it. No one else wanted to rent the apartment, but he's like, what do I care?
Yeah, he goes like, it doesn't bother me. I can't see it anyway. And you know what that reminded me of with the red lighting? Remember the Seinfeld episode when that chicken place opens up?
Yeah, Kenny Rogers Roasters.
Yeah. Oh man, it just reminded me of that. I thought that was pretty funny. And then, he asks her about the like you talked about, if she's got the contract or a copy of the contracts and the information. She said no, she lied, but she does. She has it in her house, and she goes to get it when presumably Matt falls asleep, and she's attacked again.
But he hears her leaving his apartment, so he puts on his Daredevil getup and follows her. And
he rescues her in another fight scene.
This was my favorite fight scene of the episode. It was so good.
It was bad, especially because they ended up falling through the window, and
they crashed through the window.
It's rainy. There's puddles, and it's like, just like I said, this show not only did it nail the characters and the interactions, but the cinematography and the lighting really add, to the quality of this episode. Those aspects elevate it.
Yeah, the shot, the frame of Matt laying on the ground after they tumble through the window, and his face is in the puddle on the ground is forming. It really puts you in the scene, and you can feel the water, and you can hear the silence and the rainfall. I really like the flashback in that scene of him being asleep at his house, and his dad comes in and wakes him up and says, "No, you got to keep studying. I don't want you to end up like me. You got to work hard in school." And he's like, keep going, Matt. And then Matt is remembering this, and that's what pushes him to get up off the ground and continue the fight.
And that's cool because like he has that in that flashback, like his father puts his hands on his face so he can touch his face and all the bruises and the cuts and the scrapes, and he's like, this is why I need you to focus on your studying, because, you know, like him letting him feel his face without him saying, you know, I don't want you to fight because this is like he's showing him, look, this is why, without telling him, this is why I'm always harping on you to study and get a good education, right? And I thought that was a very cool way of doing it, right? And then really, before we get to how they get Karen out, because that happens shortly after the fight. What I loved about you know, this episode was they never showed us the Kingpin.
Nope.
They never even said his name.
In fact, but when one of the what we are led to believe are like criminal associates is about to say his name, and he says Mr., and he's cut off by Kingpin's lackey, who says, we don't say his name.
Yeah, but just like the allusion to him and the referencing to him, I was like it made him intimidating.
Sure.
And then when you hear his voice over the phone, it's like, my God, this guy is going to be dangerous.
And we will certainly see in the upcoming episodes how dangerous he is. He's a brutal, physically imposing, and he's willing to do anything to get what he wants.
Yeah. He doesn't play around, but it just amazed me how, without showing him, they made him one of the most physically threatening individuals. And again, we haven't seen a frame of footage with him yet. That's great. That comes down to great exposition, great setup, and Vincent D'Onofrio and that voice. Even that voice, it's like it's not booming. He's not yelling, you know, when we do hear him talk. But it's just so. It throws you off. It's alarming. It's discomforting because he's so. It's gravelly, but it's soft at the same time, and it's like, I don't know how to feel about this guy, right? So I mean, if you read the comics, you know what he's like, but for somebody that just turned on Netflix back in the day and, hey, I'm going to watch this Daredevil show because the trailer looked cool. I mean, I can imagine that they'd be thrown off by that voice, be like, wait a minute, I haven't even seen this guy, but he's giving me the creeps already, right? I'm concerned, right? So
well. And even though we don't see him, we are shown how far his reach goes. So, you know, when he's trying to get Karen killed in the jail, he's able to get a jail guard to go into her cell and attempt to strangle her. We see that he's able to manipulate this jail guard because the guard has some debts that he owes. That I guess the Kingpin has taken over those books, and now he owes those debts. But later in the episode, that guard is shown to be dead of what looks to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound. We don't know if that's actually the case, or if Kingpin had him taken out as well.
And it's funny though, because everybody that failed him in like quieting Karen Page, they show it ended up dead.
Yep. And
so again, it just shows you his. You know, like you were saying, his reach is pretty impressive. So,
yeah, including the guy who went into her apartment to get the flash drive. At the end of the episode, in a little montage, we see him hanging in a jail cell.
He's dead. Yeah. So, that was very. It was such a great build to his eventual reveal. Like you want to see him. Like it's at the point where you want to see him. But you don't, because, you know, when you see him, things are going to get a whole lot worse.
Yep.
Like, now you're kind of feeling good because it's like, hey, Daredevil, I mean, they saved Karen. They saved the day, right? Good first day on the job, you know what I mean? But it's like once he shows up, it ain't gonna be pretty. And speaking of saving the day, when Daredevil gets his hands on the flash drive, he makes it so that the newspaper gets it and publishes the story, exposing the fraud and the cover up and all that jazz, and which exonerates Karen Page. So again, using the newspaper, the media, the newspaper in the comics was a big deal. In the comics, It was the Daily Bugle, but they couldn't use the Daily Bugle because Sony and Spider-Man. Right. So they called it something. They called it something else here.
But it's still the same reporter, Ben Urich.
Yeah, Ben Urich, which is the more important thing because that's the key from the comics. So, yeah. Is there anything else you want to touch on about the episode, or?
No, I don't think so. It's a great introduction episode. It's a great origin episode. It makes you want to see more of the Daredevil character. I want to see more of Nelson and Murdoch, attorney at law. And as you mentioned, I just want to see the Kingpin. So It's a perfect build-up. It leads you at the end of the episode wanting more. And when this episode premiered on Netflix, you were able to do just that. You were able to plug right into the second episode and keep going. When it comes back on Disney Plus, I think we're gonna be in weekly mode, waiting for the next one.
Yeah, which is not going to be, and they may split it up into 2 parts, so we might get 9, and then have to wait a bit and get the back 9. So who knows?
Yeah,
right? It's time. It's the days of binging on Netflix and staying up till 4 or 5 in the morning watching it are gonna be gone eventually. But I love this episode. As a longtime fan of the character, it checked all the boxes for me. It gave us enough of his origin. It touched on the religion. It showed him being a good, capable lawyer. And it showed us Daredevil kicking ass. I think if you're a newbie coming into Daredevil, I would be confident in showing you this episode. And you'd be up to speed on what you need to know going forward.
Yep.
And again, at the end, I'm not going to lie to you. I wanted to watch another one, but for the purposes of this podcast and vidcast, I delayed that urge. I don't have good enough willpower to become a Green Lantern, but I have enough willpower to stop myself from watching another episode.
We'll get to it soon enough.
Indeed. So I loved it. And with that said, let's give it a letter grade and we'll wrap things up.
Oh, this is an A for me. This is Netflix at the top of their game. Charlie Cox is a tremendous Matt Murdock / Daredevil. I really like the rest of the cast too. Eldon Henson as Foggy, Deborah Ann Woll as Karen. What's the guy's name that works for Kingpin? Is it Leland?
Well, isn't it Wesley? Is it Wesley or Leland?
Oh, yeah, you're right. Leland is the older guy.
Yeah.
Leland is the older guy with the glasses. You're right. Wesley, the actor who plays him, comes across just so creepy.
Yeah.
The pacing is really well done. I like the mix of flashbacks with current day and weaving them together so that it fits in the actual story that they're telling. So yeah, really well done all around, I think. So it's an A for me.
Yeah, I agree with everything Chris said, and it's an A for me. I'd contend that as a single piece of entertainment, like 55 minutes, like in terms of episodic, it's one of the best things now Marvel Studios and Marvel in general has put out, in my opinion. So it's an A from me as well. But
it's one of my favorite series pilots ever.
Absolutely, yeah. I would agree. If I had to name three comments, here I'll do it now, and it's going to piss some people off because I didn't name their thing, but whatever. If I had to name three, my top three comic book superhero TV pilots, it would be Daredevil, Smallville,
I knew you were going to
and
say
Green
Smallville.
Arrow.
All top notch.
Top 3. 4 would be Lois and Clark. 5 would be Flash. There, I gave you a top 5, and it wasn't even called for in the episode. That's a bonus. We should have tagged that on the post credit, made it a post credit scene. But that's too much work for Donnie. I don't want to make the poor guy go nuts trying to add post credit scenes in here now. But that's it for us. Of course, we will be talking plenty more Daredevil, both the show and the comics. So stay tuned for those. But between now and when we come back to talk more Daredevil, you can talk with us about Daredevil on social media. So, Chris, if they want to chat Daredevil with you, where can they do that?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Chris N. Harrelson, or you can search for Commodore Schmidlap, and I'll probably be the only one that pops up. Adam will post about this in the Facebook group, Multiverse Musings Podcast Network. So, jump in there, find the post about this, comment below. We'll be up in there. We'll see you there.
The link will be listed below on the where you list the episode. And if you want to find me on Twitter, it's at Adam_LeafsFan. The podcast network has its own Twitter page where I just post the links to the episode. It's at MMNPDC. Chris mentioned the Facebook page already. So if that's more your thing, go there and I'll add you and we can continue the conversation there. But remember, until next time, Daredevil, the man without fear, is forever. From the first time he gives low-life criminals an ass-kicking to the last. So long, everybody.